Priscilla, welcome to today's virtual career event, especially for graduates and students. So we're really here to support those in their early careers. So Priscilla, please introduce yourself and explain what motivated you to join AltGen.
Thank you, Rainey. So AltGen is a renewable energy recruitment firm with its footprint firmly in Africa. Um, I am one of the co-founders of the organization. It's myself and my husband. We started it predominantly because we were living in the bottom of Africa, in the little desert called the Namib in Namibia, with our young children living off the grid. And it was the early stages of renewable energy globally in the market. We have loads of recruitment experience. We'd owned 2 recruitment firms before, and we decided to open this one. We've subsequently ventured into the European market during COVID. So our footprint is firmly African, but a lot of our investors that invest in the projects in Africa, so the financial area, sits in Europe and the UK. So we have offices here in London and 7 other offices around Africa.
Wow, fascinating. And can I ask Priscilla, sort of what role do you specifically play in supporting early career opportunities?
We don't do too many of our clients do not require early stage opportunities for the financial areas. So we don't do any internships or anything, but we participate a lot in just assisting candidates in understanding the market, where they could go to get their first 2 or 3 years of experience, what that experience should look like, and how they can then enter the renewable energy market.
So very much sort of advice-based help and support, which I know is much needed. What would you say is the scarce skills in the investment and finance space in renewable energy, in renewables, and the projected skill sets needed? And how do you create a career path that will set you apart for a long time employment?
So there's 3 areas to the renewable energy financial market, if you want to call it that. So it's very similar to any other infrastructure organization. You have the early stage development, and then you have the construction and the operation side and the maintenance. So early stage developments, the financial skills there are a lot of financial modeling, investment analysis, mergers and acquisitions. Then to the construction phase, it's been able to work with the lenders, the funders, understanding the drawdown process, understanding what needs to be done there from the ESG perspective. And then in the operations and maintenance, it's your normal financial management accounting kind of skills, again, with a very, very strong focus on ESG. So a lot of the renewable energy projects are supported specifically in Africa, but a lot of other places around the world are supported by large institutional investors like the DFIs, which are your World Banks, your FMOs, your CDC, BII, the British Institute of Investors, and those are pension fund companies, and there is very strict attainment to ESG standards.
Okay.
In terms of growth path, most people coming into this market would have worked in some form of private equity or a bank where they'd have exposure to sort of mergers and acquisitions. A lot of investment analysis work happens, some due diligence. So if candidates or entries into this market come with a very strong academic background and can find themselves coming out of any of the big banking environments, or the likes of the big 5 or 4 consultants, your Deloittes, your KPMGs, then that would help them get into our type of clients, which are your developers and then your large asset managements that manage a number of renewable energy projects.
I see. And so for those starting their career in the renewable energy space, what approach do you think they should take to find that right career and job opportunity?
I think it's about passion in our space. We though the money is not as good as it would be in some other private equity companies,
Right.
the it's if you've got the passion, understand what area you would like to play. This is a very vast environment. It goes from clean tech kind of startups and the electric vehicle sectors, to impact funding in a cook stove environment. So
Mhm.
taking people off burning wood and charcoal in Africa and making them use clean cooking stoves, or to do these large infrastructure projects. So I would just say have a good, strong look at yourself as to what drives you and motivates you. It is a unforgiving environment in many respects. These projects take very long to come to fruition. We could
Mhm.
work in the European market. You're working for 18 months to 2 years before you're starting to see any kind of traction on your projects. In the African market and the other emerging markets, it can be up to 10 years. So you have to be quite stubborn. You have to
Yeah.
have a passion for it. And if you don't have a passion for it, you are not going to enjoy it.
So when you talk about passion, that sort of specifically, what sort of skill sets are required?
Good financial understanding,
Mm-hmm.
exposure to as many different tax regimes as possible in the emerging markets, especially understanding how to leverage your return on investment, your levelized cost of ownership in terms of your energy is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, just being financial
Mm-hmm.
engineering, I would put it that way. So understanding all the rules and then
Mm-hmm.
how you could break the rules to get to where you need to be,
Right.
ultimately.
And then in terms of practical tips, can you provide any to make a prospective candidate stand out? Is there anything they should be doing from both sort of a CV, cover letter perspective? Should they be preparing in a certain way for an interview and then following up on that interview?
Yeah. So let's talk about the front ends, right? When you're coming into handing a CV into a recruiter, we
Mm-hmm.
have probably 30 seconds to review your CV.
Mm-hmm.
I do not need to have a long, involved cover letter that tells me how great you are and how passionate you are. I want to see it in what you've done. So take a deep look in yourself and say, what is it that I've done? Where have I volunteered that shows that I have a passion for a better future, ultimately? Explain that in a way that will aligns to what it is that you're looking to do. So if you have volunteered in the past
Mm-hmm.
at university, even it's for an older lady, maybe you were her caregiver for a while, make sure you
Mm-hmm.
can bring that into being passionate about helping people going forward. And if you've done any sort of project at university, bring that in as well, show what you've done. So we work on what we call the STAR technique. It is a very old-fashioned technique, but it works. It talks
Mm-hmm.
about describing the situation that you're in, the task that you did, the action that you did, and the results that you did. So always everything should be about that. So make sure your CV is short, but it gives us the pertinent points. Highlight your leadership, if you're a recent graduate, we want to see your results. We want to
Mm-hmm.
see any projects that you've done, put all of those in. Then in terms of applying, right? I always
Mm-hmm.
say it is always better to have a conversation with somebody than just send an email and hope and pray.
Right.
So if you've got a connection there, try and connect with them. It's harder to say sorry to somebody when you've had an engagement with them than it is to just say sorry to someone when you just see a two-dimensional CV. It also helps you in that conversation to understand the deeper areas of what they're actually requiring. So all jobs have a surface level of what it is that we need, but there's stuff below that packs it up. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to come through on the interview as well. So let's talk about the interview. We always say in our business that it's not the best person for the job that gets the job, but the person that interviewed the best. And I cannot emphasize how much practice you need to have to get through some of these interviews. Some of the larger organizations that have massive, big intern recruitment processes put you through a whole battery of tests first. You've got to pass some online tests. before you can move on. But ultimately, what everybody is looking to do and employ somebody who can think and can be independent, but not too arrogant that they won't ask the questions because you are young, and that will not take too much of my management time. So how do you make sure that your stories that you tell in an interview show those attributes? Show that you might be naive and not know everything, but you know what you don't know and you're happy to answer and ask questions and seek guidance. But that you're also very comfortable working on your own and getting things done and producing correctly. And therefore, you're not going to take up too much of my time. So prepare, work your stories around a STAR technique all the time, and engage and try and bring and link your experience, which you've done, which might be very limited, but link it into what the client is looking for.
That's fantastic advice. And how can candidates network in the digital environment, the one that we now see ourselves operating in?
So obviously LinkedIn is the big place to play in terms of marketing, but network in terms of platforms as well, job boards, network in terms of associations, and I would say as much possible face to face. So attending conferences is also a good thing. Talking to people. If you're going to attend a conference or a small networking event, come with a question that you want to have asked. So show some curiosity, right? The new sort of attribute that all clients are looking for at the moment is the ability to learn, and that learning comes from curiosity, right? So be curious and ask questions. So don't ask the questions of what it is that you do and are you looking for, can I come and work for you? But ask a question, something unique that's specific to that client, that will make that client sit back and go, this is an interesting person. I want to engage with them further. Obviously, in terms of things like LinkedIn, it's a marketing tool. Market yourself correctly. Watch what your pictures look like in the background. Make sure that when you are on your job search journey, your entire digital profile is giving the same image, right? We used to in the past, GDPR prevents us from doing that, but in the past clients would ask us, have you checked their social media platform? And there you're checking for things like, is there any sort of untoward values that have been driven or spoken about in your Facebook profile? Are you showing too many pictures of you at the pub in your Instagram profiles, right? And now we want you to work 10 hours a day, and you're spending an awful lot of time in the pub. So just make sure that your whole profile speaks about being professional for that period that you are looking for a job.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying in terms of the influence social media can have on an individual's perception of external perception, for sure. You talk about sort of events. Is there any specific ones you think students and graduates should be attending? Obviously, they're at today's VC event, but are there others that you would recommend?
To be honest, I wouldn't, because there are just so many. So people would prefer to recruit individuals that come into their geographical zone. So I would look at your regional events that take place. And if you're living in a certain part of the UK, there's plenty of regional events. On the renewable energy side, there's renewable energy conferences, networking events for every type of renewable energy you can imagine. There's all the investment profiles that happen, the large summits, the very small ones. I would encourage you to do one or two very large ones as a spectator, so going around looking at who are the big players in the market. And then I would encourage one smaller one where it's 200 people and you can actually have a big impact there and people will get to speak to you.
So a combination of almost using events as a research opportunity, but also sort of more of an intimate networking opportunity too. You spoke about how you founded AltGen with your husband and came across as being very sort of family orientated. What is the culture at AltGen, and what makes it unique?
So it is very much one of a family. We're not a small family anymore. I think we have over 50 staff spread over across many various jurisdictions. The culture is one of obviously passion for what we do, renewable energy, passion for people. So
Yeah.
part of what we do as well is we support our clients in the operations and maintenance phase of these large plants. And in the African context, similar to the European context, but more so in the African context, there is a large community engagement process there. So we do a lot of learning outreach programs, and that's what the culture in AltGen is very much learning, very much high achievement, overachieving, if I can say that to a point. But we are managed, and I think this has always been an interesting point for our clients, and that recruitment firms are obviously managed on the amount of placements they make, and that generates your revenue. But we are also managed on how many megawatts of renewable energy power we put in the grid every
Right.
year. So a lot of these projects will work on projects for many, many years, and a lot of the organizations will work on many and never see them come to fruition. So you can make lots of money out of that, but it's not putting renewable energy onto the grid and saving the world. And that's what we manage ourselves as well. So it's passion, it's learning, it's drive to make sure we leave the place better than where we are now.
That's a good passion to have. That's for sure. And we've spoken about sort of, the initial CV, the cover letter, the prep for the interview. But once a candidate actually gets the role, what advice can you give them to progress their career?
Stay in the role for 2 years. Why I say this is because your first couple of months, there is what we call in the organizational design world, the competency cycle, that you start at the very beginning, not knowing anything, right? So you are very aware that you actually are incompetent. So it's called conscious incompetence. And that takes you about 3 months to sort of learn who's who in the zoo, what your job is kind of, and you get that. And that's a lot of the time the probation periods will have that effect. It'll be 3 months or so. Then you move into being consciously competent. So you check and you question yourself every day, am I doing it right? Because you're still new to the job. And that might take you another 3 to 6 months until you start going into the unconsciously competent, where you start just doing it like brushing your teeth, right? You don't concentrate on how you're doing it, you're doing it. That can take up to a year to get to that point. And until that point, you actually don't learn. Because it's when you make mistakes and you jump into the unconsciously incompetent phase where you start to make the mistakes and you sit back and you question yourself and you learn to do something in a different way, that you then start to really develop your skills. And so we say at least 2 years. You're never going to learn enough about your context and how to do things. You taught very much at university that this is the way, but there are many ways to skin a cat. So learn those different ways, because people will employ you on your ability to manipulate situations to skin the cat in a better way, right? So stick it out, even if it's as grotty as can be, stick it out. My other thing I'd like to say is do not accept a job based on the pure salary alone. Your
Okay.
salary is very important. Your starting salary dictates your next salary, and so you go up. But if you're starting with a salary that's very high, you are limiting your ability to grow in the future. And you do not want to stay with a company for longer than 3 to 4 years, not in the beginning, because you do still want to move and learn. So my advice is to make sure that you are joining an organization that is going to give you as much learning as possible, as much support as possible to make mistakes without making bad mistakes, right? You need to be able to be comfortable to make some mistakes to learn. So to be able to support your learning, and to give you as many different contexts as possible that you will learn different ways of doing the same thing. And that will stand you in good stead when you move on to your next role, and make sure your next role helps you get some sort of aspect of your career that you didn't have in the last role. And so you go on, you need to build and build and build. So if I can give you an example of financial modeling, you want to be able to learn how to use various different tools to model it. So if you are in an environment that's only using an Excel model, um, and in the renewable energy space and in a particular company, your next role could be using a different type of tool to do the modeling in a different type of organization. Maybe you're modeling wind farms, now you want to model solar farms, and maybe you want to model in the Asian market and not in the African market. And that's how you will then build yourself as a good all-rounder in the renewable energy space.
Fantastic. And then finally, Priscilla, if there was one piece of advice you would give someone early on in their career, what would that be?
Follow your passion. Follow your passion. Find out what it is that you want to do. Don't be too strict on that passion, right? Your passion can be many different ways to take you to where you want to be. When you come out of university as a recent graduate, you tend not to really know what you want, but you have an idea of what it is that you want. So focus on that idea and be open to getting to that position in a different way. But don't run after something that you're not passionate about, because you're going to be miserable. You're going to do a bad job, and that's going to be your legacy. When we reference you, we're going to be told, well, he was mediocre, right? And not he was great. And you are great at something that you're passionate about.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Priscilla, for your time today. I certainly learned a lot from what we've discussed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I wish everyone luck. Thank you, Rainey.